Mom and Dad made it clear I wasn't welcome at the engagement, saying I'd ruin the pictures and my sister deserved better, so I smiled and canceled all payments while sending her the receipts. My name is Derek, and I'm 27 years old. I work as a construction project manager and have been pretty successful over the past 6 years. While I'm not rich by any means, I'm comfortable enough to enjoy a decent lifestyle. I own a nice condo in downtown Miami and drive a paid-off Jeep, which gives me a sense of financial security that many people my age don't have. More importantly for this story, I've been smart about investing my money instead of letting it sit in traditional savings accounts earning minimal interest. This financial discipline has served me well over the years, though it's also made me a target for family members who seem to think my success means I should bankroll their poor decisions. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings in what probably looks like a typical middle-class family from the outside. There's my sister Victoria, who's 24, and she's been treated like the family princess since the day she was born. Then there's my younger brother Kevin, who's 21 and works in landscaping. Kevin is honestly the only normal person in our entire family. He works hard, pays his own bills, and has never once asked me for financial help. But the reality of our family dynamic is quite different from what it appears to be on the surface. For almost a decade now, I've essentially been everyone's personal ATM, constantly bailing out family members from one crisis after another. This pattern has become so established that my relatives seem to view my bank account as some kind of emergency fund that exists solely for their benefit. Let me paint you a detailed picture of Victoria, because understanding her personality is absolutely central to this entire mess. She's one of those Instagram influencers with about 9,000 followers who genuinely believes she's destined for fame and fortune. Her entire online presence revolves around posting lifestyle content, fashion photos, and motivational quotes about living your best life, all funded by money she doesn't actually have and has never earned herself. Victoria has never held a steady job for more than 7 months at a time. Whenever she gets hired somewhere, she inevitably quits because she claims she needs to focus on building her brand or networking with potential collaborators. In her mind, having a regular job is beneath her because she's convinced that her big break is always just around the corner. She talks constantly about sponsorship deals that never materialize and business opportunities that somehow never work out. But she never seems to connect her lack of success with her complete unwillingness to put in consistent effort. The pattern with Victoria has been exactly the same for years, and I was too naive to see how I was enabling her behavior. She would get herself into some kind of crisis, usually financial, and then call me crying about how desperate and helpless she was. Being the responsible older brother who genuinely cared about his sister's well-being, I would always step in to bail her out, thinking that maybe this time she would learn from the experience and finally grow up. Spoiler alert, she never did. Some examples of my brotherly support over the years will give you a better sense of just how ridiculous this situation had become. When Victoria totaled her Audi, a car that I had co-signed for because her credit was absolutely terrible, she was texting and driving like an irresponsible teenager. Instead of dealing with the insurance situation like a normal adult, she begged me to handle everything quietly so it wouldn't damage her carefully curated public image. I ended up paying $13,500 out of my own pocket to get her car completely repaired, plus another $3,200 to an attorney to keep the incident off her driving record. Her response to this incredibly generous gesture? "Thanks, Derek. You're the best. I'll totally pay you back someday." Of course, that someday never came, and she never brought up the debt again. Then there was the time she had to move out of her ex-boyfriend's place because he caught her cheating on him. Did she look for a reasonable apartment within her virtually non-existent means? Of course not. She found this ridiculously expensive place in the trendiest part of town and called me sobbing about being homeless and needing immediate help with rent money. I ended up paying 5 months of her rent, which totaled $7,200, while she supposedly got back on her feet and figured out her living situation. Again, there was no real gratitude, just a casual, "That's what big brothers are for, right?" As if I was somehow obligated to fund her lifestyle choices, regardless of how irresponsible they were. The financial support didn't stop there. When Victoria decided she needed money for her so-called content creation business, which essentially meant buying expensive clothes and props for Instagram photos, guess who she called when her credit cards got maxed out from her shopping addiction? That's right, me. I also helped her out when she claimed she desperately needed a new laptop for editing, professional camera equipment for better photo quality, and money for networking events that were really just expensive brunches with other wannabe influencers who were just as delusional about their prospects as she was. Over the years, I estimate that I've spent somewhere around $38,000 on Victoria's various crises and dreams. And not once, not a single time, has she ever paid me back even $1, or even genuinely acknowledged the tremendous sacrifice I was making to support her unrealistic lifestyle and career aspirations. But I kept doing it anyway because she's my sister, and I genuinely wanted to see her succeed in life. I thought that maybe if I kept supporting her financially and emotionally, she would eventually find her footing in the world and become the responsible, successful person I knew she had the potential to be. I also believed that she would eventually appreciate what I was doing for her and that all this support would bring us closer together as siblings. Boy, was I completely wrong about that assumption. About 11 months ago, Victoria started dating this guy named Brandon. He's 32 years old and works as a financial advisor at some small firm that nobody's ever heard of. He drives a leased BMW and has that slick salesman vibe that immediately made me suspicious of his motives and character. But Victoria was absolutely head over heels for him, primarily because Brandon appeared to have money, which is basically her only requirement when it comes to choosing romantic partners. She started posting these incredibly cringy couple photos constantly on all her social media platforms. The pictures always featured Brandon in his designer polo shirts and boat shoes, while Victoria wore outfits that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her captions were equally nauseating, with phrases like, "found my king," and "living my best life with my CEO babe." For the record, he definitely wasn't a CEO of anything. But I guess the truth didn't matter as much as the image they were trying to project. The whole relationship felt completely performative to me, like they were both playing carefully crafted roles for social media consumption, rather than actually connecting as real people with genuine feelings for each other. I tried my best to be supportive because I genuinely wanted Victoria to be happy and find someone who would treat her well. But something felt fundamentally off about Brandon from the very first day I met him. He had this particular way of talking about money and success that reminded me of those get-rich-quick seminar guys you see advertising on late-night television. He was always casually mentioning his investment portfolio and various business ventures, but he never gave any specific details about what he actually did for work or how he generated his income. The whole thing seemed like an elaborate performance designed to impress people rather than a reflection of any real financial success. Then in January, Brandon proposed to Victoria in what can only be described as a completely over-the-top spectacle. It was a big, flashy proposal at an expensive restaurant downtown, complete with a professional photographer hiding in the bushes to capture every single moment for posterity and social media. Victoria posted about the engagement for weeks straight afterward, with captions like, "I said yes to forever," and "can't wait to be Mrs. Richardson." The engagement ring alone probably cost more than Brandon makes in 4 months, which should have been my first major red flag about their actual financial situation. But I was trying to be supportive and give them the benefit of the doubt, so I didn't voice my concerns at the time. When I texted Victoria to congratulate her on the engagement and offered to help with wedding planning however I could, her immediate response was telling. Instead of saying, "Thank you for the kind offer," or "I'm so excited to celebrate with you," she immediately jumped to, "Thanks, bro. Actually, we could definitely use help with some of the costs." Not a word about love, commitment, or celebration, just straight to asking for money before I had even finished expressing my congratulations. But I figured this was her wedding, probably the most important day of her entire life, so I should do something special to show how much I cared about her happiness. I told her that I would cover their honeymoon as my wedding gift to them, which I thought was an incredibly generous and meaningful gesture. She got super excited when I made this offer, and immediately started showing me these absolutely ridiculous resort packages in exotic locations like Thailand, the Bahamas, and Costa Rica. They eventually settled on this 9,200 luxury package at some 5-star resort in Costa Rica that included a private villa, couples spa treatments, a personal chef, and all the other Instagram-worthy amenities that Victoria seemed to think were essential for a proper honeymoon experience. I set up a separate savings account specifically for this purpose and transferred the full amount, thinking this would be a meaningful way to celebrate their new marriage and demonstrate how much I cared about Victoria's happiness and future. Her reaction when I told her about this incredibly generous gift was both telling and disappointing. "Thanks, Derek. You're amazing," she said. Brandon's going to be so impressed that I have such a generous family. Not, I'm grateful for this incredible gift, or this means so much to me that you're doing this for us. Instead, her primary concern was that Brandon would be impressed by my generosity, like I was some kind of prop in their relationship, rather than her brother trying to do something genuinely nice for her wedding. But the real problem started when they began planning the actual ceremony and reception. Victoria went into full bridezilla mode from the moment they got officially engaged, and I mean that in the most literal sense possible. She started talking constantly about wanting a luxury wedding experience with at least 180 guests, live entertainment, premium everything, and all the high-end touches that she'd seen in wedding magazines and on social media. Keep in mind that neither Victoria nor Brandon had any real income to speak of that could possibly support such an elaborate celebration. Victoria was still playing Instagram influencer without any actual revenue streams, and Brandon was working at a small financial planning firm making maybe $58,000 a year at most. The math simply didn't add up for the kind of wedding they were envisioning. When I asked them directly how they planned to afford such an elaborate celebration, Victoria just laughed dismissively and said that Brandon was handling all the finances with this smug, confident smile on her face. Then she added, with a tone that made my stomach drop, "Plus, we know we can count on family to help make our dream day happen." There it was, laid out in plain terms. She wasn't just expecting me to pay for their honeymoon. She was actively planning on me funding the entire wedding from start to finish. The assumption was so casual and matter-of-fact that it was clear she'd already decided this was going to happen, regardless of whether I had actually agreed to it or not. Over the next few months, Victoria posted constantly about wedding planning activities. Dress shopping, venue tours, cake tastings, flower arrangements. All the typical bride activities, but amplified to absolutely ridiculous levels. She was acting like she was planning a celebrity wedding instead of a normal person ceremony, posting multiple times daily about every minor detail and decision. Then one day, she posted something that hit me like a freight train. She had apparently booked their wedding venue, and the name she mentioned was Ocean View Estate. The moment I read those words, I felt my blood pressure spike, because Ocean View Estate was a property that my business partner Lucas and I had purchased and completely renovated over the past 20 months. Let me back up and explain this crucial detail that makes this whole situation even more complicated. About 3 years ago, I decided to partner with my friend Lucas to invest in distressed commercial real estate. Lucas owns several successful restaurants around the city and had been looking for ways to diversify his investment portfolio beyond the food industry. We decided to pool our financial resources and start buying properties that had been hit hard during recent economic downturns. We were specifically targeting event venues and wedding halls that were selling for way below their actual market value because their previous owners had gone bankrupt or couldn't afford to maintain them properly. One of our very first purchases was Ocean View Estate, this absolutely beautiful wedding venue complete with manicured gardens, an elegant ballroom, and stunning waterfront views. The previous owners had declared bankruptcy during the economic difficulties, and we managed to acquire it for about 65% of its actual market worth. We then spent 7 intensive months and a considerable amount of our own money completely renovating the property, updating everything from the electrical systems to the landscaping. Our goal was to transform it into one of the premier wedding destinations in the entire area, and I'm proud to say we succeeded beyond our expectations. I had never mentioned this particular investment to my family, and I had very good reasons for keeping it private. They already saw me as their personal bank and emergency fund, and I didn't need Victoria trying to get free venue rentals for her friends or expecting special treatment and discounts just because we were related. But there she was on Instagram, posting multiple photos of the venue with captions like, "Found our perfect location." And Brandon surprised me by booking the most exclusive place in the city. She had absolutely no idea that her big brother was actually one of the owners of her so-called dream wedding venue. I immediately logged into our booking system to check the details and found the reservation right there in black and white. Richardson Wedding, June 22nd, premium package for 180 guests, total cost $31,000. But here's where things got concerning. They had made the initial booking and reservation, but they hadn't paid the required deposit that we demand from all clients. Our standard business policy requires a 50% deposit within 2 weeks of making any booking to hold the date. This policy exists because we've learned from experience that people who don't put money down up front often end up canceling at the last minute, leaving us scrambling to fill the date. It had been 4 weeks since their initial booking, and we still hadn't received a single dollar from them. I assumed that Brandon was handling the financial side of things and would send the deposit payment soon, but I made a mental note to keep a close eye on the situation. Little did I know that this would become the catalyst for everything that followed. That's when Victoria called me with the request that would ultimately change our entire relationship forever. It was a Friday evening, and I had just gotten home from work when my phone rang. I could tell immediately from Victoria's tone of voice that she wanted something big. There was that particular combination of fake sweetness and underlying desperation that I'd learned to recognize over the years. "Derek, we need to talk about the wedding," she said without any preliminary small talk. "Okay, what's up?" I responded, already bracing myself for whatever was coming next. "So Brandon and I have been going over all the costs and expenses," she continued, "and we've realized we're going to need more family support than we originally thought." Here we go, I thought to myself. The moment I'd been dreading, but somehow knew was inevitable. "What kind of support are you talking about?" I asked, even though I already suspected where this conversation was heading. "Well, the venue ended up being more expensive than we initially planned," she explained. "And with all the other vendors we need to book, we were hoping maybe you could help us with some of the major expenses." I took a deep breath before responding. "Victoria, I'm already paying 9 people $200 for your entire honeymoon. That's a pretty substantial gift by anyone's standards." "I know, and we totally appreciate that," she said quickly. "But this is a once-in-a-lifetime event, Derek, and you're doing so well with your real estate investments and everything. We just need maybe like $16,000 to make everything absolutely perfect." So she wanted $16,000 on top of the honeymoon I was already paying for. She was essentially asking me to spend over $25,000 total on her wedding to someone I barely knew and frankly didn't trust. The audacity of the request was staggering, but what came next was even worse. "Victoria, that's a lot of money," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. "Have you and Brandon considered maybe scaling back some of the expenses to something more affordable?" That's when her entire tone changed completely, and I heard the real Victoria emerge from behind the fake sweetness she'd been using moments before. "Scale back," she said, with obvious indignation. "Derek, this is my wedding. This is supposed to be the most important day of my entire life. I'm not going to have some cheap, embarrassing ceremony just because you don't want to help your only sister." "It's not about not wanting to help you," I replied, feeling my own frustration starting to build. "I'm already contributing a substantial amount of money to your celebration." "Really? Because it sounds like you don't care about me at all," she shot back with venom in her voice. "Brandon's family is contributing to make this day special. Why can't mine do the same thing?" "I am contributing, Victoria. I'm paying for your entire honeymoon, which cost nearly $10,000. "That's different," she said dismissively. "That's just a gift. This is about showing up for family when it actually matters most." I was getting seriously frustrated at this point, and I could feel my patience wearing dangerously thin. "Victoria, I've been showing up financially for years. The car payments when you totaled your Audi, the rent money when you needed a place to live, the credit card debt you accumulated. All those times you needed cash for your so-called business ventures. I've probably spent close to $35,000 supporting you over the past few years." "That's what family does, Derek," she replied without missing a beat, as if all those sacrifices I'd made were somehow my obligation rather than acts of generosity. "And now, when I need you most for the biggest day of my life, you're going to abandon me completely?" Then she said the words that would fundamentally change our relationship forever. Words that revealed exactly how she really viewed me and our sibling bond. "You know what? Fine. If you don't want to help us make this day special, then Brandon and I will figure it out ourselves. But don't expect to be in any of the wedding photos. We only want pictures with people who actually supported us during this special time." I was stunned into complete silence for a moment, unable to process what I had just heard. "Are you seriously telling me that I can't be in my own sister's wedding photos because I won't give you $16,000? "I'm not saying you can't come to the wedding, Derek," she clarified with false reasonableness. "Just that we want our photos to reflect the people who were really there for us when it mattered most." That's when I heard Brandon's voice clearly in the background, and his words made everything crystal clear about their true intentions. "Tell him he can still cover the bar costs if he wants to contribute something useful," Brandon said loud enough for me to hear. And that was the precise moment when something inside me snapped. Not with explosive anger, but with a cold, clear understanding of exactly what my relationship with Victoria really was and had always been. I wasn't her brother in any meaningful sense. I was her personal ATM machine. And when the ATM said no to a withdrawal request, I suddenly became completely disposable to her. I hung up the phone without saying another word and sat in my condo staring at the wall for about 25 minutes, processing what had just happened and trying to wrap my mind around the situation. My own sister had essentially told me that I wasn't good enough to be included in her wedding photos unless I paid for the privilege, like I was some kind of vendor or service provider rather than family. I finally called Lucas and told him the entire story from beginning to end. After a few minutes of shocked silence on his end, he started laughing in a way that made me think he found the whole situation absolutely hilarious. "Derek, my friend," he said when he finally stopped laughing, "do you realize what you just told me? That my sister is completely entitled and selfish?" I replied, still feeling somewhat numb from the conversation. "No, you just told me that the people who want to book our venue are treating you like garbage, and they haven't paid their required deposit," he pointed out. Think about that for a minute. It took a second for the full implications to click in my mind, but when they did, I felt a surge of clarity. "Oh man," I said as the realization hit me. "Oh man is right," Lucas continued. "Dude, they haven't paid us a single dollar for that booking. According to our standard contract, if they don't submit the deposit within 30 days of making the reservation, the date gets automatically released back into our available inventory." I started doing the math quickly in my head. "How long has it been since they made the booking?" "Let me check our system," Lucas said, and I could hear him typing on his computer. "It's been 27 days exactly. They have exactly 3 days left, or we cancel the booking per our standard contract terms." "Lucas, they have absolutely no idea that I'm an owner of that venue," I told him. "Even better," he replied with obvious amusement. "So, what do you want to do about this situation?" I thought about it for a moment, weighing my options and considering the potential consequences. "Let's follow our contract exactly as it's written. If they don't pay by the deadline, we release the date according to our standard business practices. No exceptions, no special treatment." "You sure about this?" "It is your sister's wedding we're talking about," Lucas said, giving me one last chance to reconsider. "She made it very clear that I'm not really welcome at her wedding unless I pay for the privilege of being there," I replied. "So let's treat this like any other business transaction with clients who don't meet their obligations." Over the next couple of days, I decided to do some thorough research into Brandon's actual financial situation. One of the major advantages of working in construction project management is that you learn how to investigate people's finances for due diligence purposes when you're working on large projects or evaluating potential contractors. The skills transfer quite well to personal situations. What I discovered was absolutely fascinating and confirmed every suspicion I'd had about Brandon from the very beginning. He wasn't nearly as successful as he'd been pretending to be, not even close. His LinkedIn profile claimed he was a senior investment advisor, but the company he worked for had maybe 15 employees total, which meant it was essentially a small-time operation. Based on industry standards and the size of his firm, his actual salary was probably around $52,000 annually, nowhere near the six-figure income that Victoria thought he was making. But even more interesting was his debt situation, which I was able to piece together through various public records and professional connections. The guy was leveraged to the absolute eyeballs with car loans, credit cards, student loans, and other financial obligations. His leased BMW, the designer clothes, the expensive restaurant dates, it was all being funded by debt rather than actual income. He was living a completely unsustainable lifestyle that was bound to collapse eventually. But the real kicker was when I found out through some mutual professional connections that Brandon had been telling people he was planning to pay for this elaborate wedding using gains from his cryptocurrency investments. This was complete and utter nonsense. The guy was broke and had been planning from the very beginning to guilt me into funding their entire wedding celebration. Meanwhile, Victoria kept texting me throughout this period, and the messages told quite a story about their growing desperation. Day 1. "Hey, have you thought more about helping with the wedding costs? Brandon really wants to get everything finalized soon." Day 2. "Derek, I'm starting to stress about getting all our vendors locked in. Can you maybe help us with the venue deposit, and Brandon can pay you back after we get some other things sorted out?" Day 3. "Seriously, Derek, I need to know if you're going to help or not. This is really important to me." I didn't respond to any of these messages, which was probably driving her crazy since she was used to me immediately jumping in to solve her problems. Finally, she sent a text that said, "Fine, whatever. Brandon and I will handle everything ourselves. Don't expect any special treatment at the wedding. Perfect." She had just given me all the justification I needed to proceed with my plan. The next few days were surprisingly peaceful for me. For the first time in years, I wasn't dealing with constant phone calls asking for money, No emergency crises that supposedly needed my immediate financial intervention, and no guilt trips about family obligations and what I should be doing for Victoria. For the first time in nearly a decade, I could focus entirely on my own life and my own priorities without constantly managing Victoria's self-created disasters and financial emergencies. It was honestly liberating in a way I hadn't expected. Lucas and I met for lunch on Thursday to discuss some other business matters we had ongoing. But obviously, the Victoria situation came up during our conversation as well. So, they've got exactly 2 days left to make their deposit, Lucas said, with a grin that told me he was enjoying the situation far more than he probably should have been. Any word from the princess? I asked. Nothing at all, I replied. I think Victoria is completely convinced that Brandon is handling all the payments and logistics. And based on what I can tell, Brandon thinks I'm going to cave at the last minute and pay for everything like I always do. Classic manipulation technique, Lucas observed. Create a crisis situation and then wait for the responsible person to step in and fix everything. Lucas shook his head with amusement. You know what we should do? We should make backup plans for that date just in case they don't come through. What kind of backup plans are you thinking? I asked. My cousin Roberto is getting married in July, and they've been looking everywhere for a venue that fits their budget and timeline. What if I told them that June 22nd just became available? I couldn't help but smile at the suggestion. Lucas, you're absolutely devious. I'm practical, he corrected me. Look, if your sister and her broke fiancé want to play games with our business, they can deal with the consequences. But we've got a business to run and bills to pay. That evening, I got a phone call from Kevin, my younger brother. He's the only family member who has never once asked me for money, and actually treats me like a real person instead of a walking checkbook, so I always enjoy talking with him. Dude, Victoria's been calling me all day, he said without any preliminary greeting. She's asking if I can loan her money for some wedding deposit. How much money? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. $15,500. She says it's a complete emergency and that she'll pay me back within a few months. I nearly choked on my dinner when I heard the amount. Kevin, please tell me you didn't agree to this. Hell no, he replied immediately. I don't have that kind of money just sitting around, and even if I did, I know she'd never pay it back based on her track record with you. What did you tell her exactly? That I'm not a bank, Kevin said bluntly. She got really mad and hung up on me when I said that. So they were scrambling now, which meant they were finally starting to understand the reality of their situation. Good. Saturday morning, exactly 24 hours before our contractual deadline, I got a voicemail from an unknown number. When I listened to it, I discovered it was from Brandon himself. Hey Derek, it's Brandon, the message began. Listen, I know there was some tension with Victoria the other day, but I wanted to reach out man to man about something. We're having a small issue with our venue deposit, just a timing thing with some of my investments liquidating. I was wondering if you might be able to help us out with a short-term loan, just until Tuesday. Then I can pay you back with interest. Give me a call when you get this. I deleted the message without calling him back. The desperation in his voice was obvious, and the fact that he was now personally reaching out to me meant they were running out of options quickly. Saturday evening, Victoria called me directly, and this time her tone was completely different from our previous conversation. Derek, we really need to talk, she said, and I could hear the panic in her voice. About what? I replied casually. Look, I'm sorry if I was difficult the other day. Wedding planning is just really stressful, you know? I didn't mean to sound ungrateful or anything like that. Okay, I said, not giving her anything to work with. The thing is, we're having a tiny issue with our venue deposit. Brandon's financial advisor says his investment money will be available Tuesday, but the venue wants payment tomorrow. Can you maybe help us out just for the weekend? How much are we talking about? I asked, even though I already knew. $15,500, but Brandon will pay you back Tuesday, I promise. Victoria, that's not exactly a small amount of money, I pointed out. I know, but it's literally just for 4 days. And this is my dream venue, Derek. If we lose this date, we'll have to postpone the whole wedding. Have you considered maybe finding a less expensive venue that's more within your actual budget? I suggested. Are you kidding me? She exploded. All our invitations have the venue name printed on them already. Our engagement photos were taken there. I've been posting about it for months on social media. I can't just change venues now. What would people think? What would I tell everyone? And there it was. The real issue wasn't about celebrating their love or starting their marriage on the right foot. It was entirely about maintaining the Instagram image and the appearance of success and luxury that she'd been cultivating online. Victoria, I can't loan you $15,500, I said firmly. Can't or won't, she asked with obvious hostility. Both, I replied honestly. She was quiet for a moment, and then her voice turned completely cold and vindictive. Fine, but don't expect me to save you a good seat at the wedding. You can sit in the back with Brandon's weird cousins. And with that, she hung up on me. I looked at my phone and realized that I was actually smiling. Less than 24 hours to go before the deadline. Sunday morning, I woke up early and made myself a big, elaborate breakfast. Waffles, sausage, scrambled eggs, the whole works. I was in an unusually good mood considering what was about to happen, and I decided to treat myself to a proper meal while I waited for the inevitable drama to unfold. Lucas texted me around 10:30 a.m. with a simple message. Deadline is in 6 hours. Any last-minute payments from the happy couple? Nope, I texted back. Complete radio silence on their end. Perfect, he replied. I already talked to Roberto about the situation. He can sign a contract Tuesday morning if the date opens up. At 3:30 p.m., exactly 1 hour before our contractual deadline, my phone started ringing constantly. Victoria called, then Brandon, then Victoria again, then more calls from unknown numbers, then Victoria again. It was like watching someone panic in slow motion. I didn't answer any of the calls. I just sat there watching my phone buzz and ring, feeling a strange sense of calm about the whole situation. At 3:47 p.m., Victoria left a voicemail, and I could hear the desperation clearly in her voice. Derek, I know you're screening my calls. Please call me back. This is a real emergency. At 3:52 p.m., Brandon left his own voicemail. Hey man, I don't know what kind of miscommunication happened here, but we really need your help. I can have your money back to you by Thursday, I promise. At 3:58 p.m., Victoria sent a text message. Derek, please call me back right now. At exactly 4:30 p.m., I received a text from our venue manager that made everything official. Richardson deposit deadline has passed. Date released per contract. Should I remove them from the system? I texted back immediately. Yes, remove them completely. At 4:33 p.m., my phone started ringing nonstop with what I can only describe as panic calls. I turned my phone completely off and went for a long, peaceful drive around the city, taking my time and enjoying the scenery while Victoria and Brandon presumably melted down. When I got home around 7:30 p.m. and finally turned my phone back on, I discovered I had 27 missed calls and 18 text messages waiting for me. Most of the messages were from Victoria, but there were several from Brandon as well, and even one from my mom, which meant the situation had escalated to family-wide drama. Victoria's text messages told quite a story and painted a clear picture of how the afternoon had unfolded. 4:35 p.m. Derek, call me now. 4:53 p.m. This isn't funny anymore. Call me back. 5:15 p.m. Brandon says the venue canceled our booking. This is your fault. 5:42 p.m. How could you let this happen? 6 p.m. I know you're seeing these messages. 6:45 p.m. Fine, be a selfish jerk. See if I care. Brandon's messages were more desperate and less angry. 4:48 p.m. Derek, we need to talk ASAP. 5:32 p.m. Dude, please call me back. We can work something out. 6:22 p.m. The venue says our date was released. I don't understand what happened. The message from my mom was brief but telling. Derek, Victoria is hysterical. Please call her. I made myself a relaxing dinner and called Lucas to fill him in on the developments. So, how does it feel to be free? He asked with obvious amusement in his voice. Pretty amazing, actually, I replied. They left me about 22 messages total. I bet they did, Lucas said, laughing. Our venue manager called me too. Apparently, your sister showed up around 5:30 p.m., demanding to speak to the owner about the cancellation. No way, I said, genuinely surprised by how quickly they'd driven over there. Yeah, she was yelling about how the cancellation was illegal and threatening to sue us for breach of contract. Our manager told her that the owner wasn't available and that she'd have to come back Tuesday if she wanted to discuss the matter further. This keeps getting better and better, I said. Oh, it gets even better than that, Lucas continued. I already called Roberto about the situation. He's coming in Tuesday morning to sign the contract for June 22nd. Same date, full deposit payment up front. Monday was completely quiet. No calls, no texts, no drama whatsoever. The silence was almost eerie after all the chaos from Sunday. This meant they were either giving up entirely or planning their next move carefully. Tuesday morning, I was at work handling some routine project management tasks when our venue manager called me with an update on the situation. Derek, your sister is here at the venue, she said. She brought her fiancé with her and they want to meet with you specifically about rebooking their date. What did you tell them? I asked. That you weren't available today, but they're not leaving. They've been sitting in our lobby for over 4 hours now. How do they seem? I asked, curious about their mental state. Desperate, she replied bluntly. The girl keeps crying and the guy looks like he hasn't slept in days. Perfect, I said. Tell them I'll be there in an hour. I drove to Ocean View Estate very slowly, deliberately taking my time and wanting them to wait a little longer. When I finally walked into the lobby, Victoria and Brandon were sitting on our couch looking absolutely terrible. Victoria's eyes were red and puffy from crying, her hair was messy and unkempt, and she was wearing sweatpants. Something I'd never seen her do in public before. Brandon looked even worse if that was possible. He was wearing wrinkled clothes, had obvious stubble, and had dark circles under his eyes like he'd been awake for days straight. They both jumped up from the couch when they saw me walk in. Derek! Victoria practically ran over like she was going to hug me, but I stepped back to maintain some distance. What are you guys doing here? I asked, playing dumb about the situation. We need to talk to the owner about getting our date back, Brandon said, trying to sound authoritative despite his obvious desperation. There was some sort of mistake with our deposit. What kind of mistake? I asked innocently. Victoria jumped in immediately. They said our date was canceled because we missed some deadline, but that's impossible because Brandon was handling all the payments. I looked directly at Brandon. So you did make the deposit on time? His face turned bright red, and he couldn't meet my eyes. Well, not exactly. There were some complications with my investment accounts. So you didn't pay the deposit at all? I asked for clarification. It's not that simple, Brandon tried to explain. Actually, it is exactly that simple, I replied. You booked a date. You didn't pay the required deposit within the specified time frame, so the date got released to other clients. That's how business contracts work in the real world. Victoria was getting visibly agitated. Derek, can you please just talk to the owner? Explain that there was a misunderstanding? I can try, I said, pretending to consider it. But I doubt it'll help. They probably already gave your date to someone else. Brandon stepped forward, trying to take control. Look, I can pay the deposit right now, plus a late fee if that's what's necessary. We just need the date back. You have 15 EA500s with you right now? I asked. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. I can get it! From where, your cryptocurrency gains? I asked with obvious skepticism. Before Brandon could answer, Victoria interrupted desperately. Derek, please, can you just ask if they'll take our booking back? This is the most important thing in my life. I pretended to think about it for a moment. You know what? Let me see if the owner is available to discuss this situation. I walked back to the office where Lucas was waiting with the biggest grin I'd ever seen on his face. He'd been watching the entire conversation through our security camera system. They look even worse than I expected, he whispered. This is just the beginning, I replied. You ready for this? I was born ready, my friend, Lucas said. We walked back out to the lobby together, and Victoria and Brandon stood up expectantly. Victoria, Brandon, I said formally, I'd like you to meet Lucas Martinez. He's the co-owner of Ocean View Estate. Lucas stepped forward with his most professional smile. So you're the couple who wants to rebook for June 22nd? Yes, Victoria said desperately. There was just a misunderstanding about the deposit timeline. No misunderstanding, Lucas interrupted matter-of-factly. You had 30 days to pay. You didn't pay. Date got released. Pretty standard business practice. Brandon tried to take control of the situation again. Sir, I understand there were some issues with our payment timeline, but we're prepared to pay the full deposit now, plus any late fees you require. Lucas looked at me, then back at Brandon. The thing is, we already have another couple signed for that date. They paid their deposit this morning. Victoria started crying again. But this is my dream wedding. We sent out invitations. We've been planning for months. Should have paid your deposit, Lucas said matter-of-factly. That's when Brandon got aggressive. This is ridiculous. You can't just cancel people's weddings like this. Actually, we can, Lucas replied calmly. It's clearly stated in the contract you signed, which you would know if you'd bothered to read it. Victoria turned to me with complete desperation in her eyes. Derek, please. You know people here. Can't you help us somehow? This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Victoria, didn't you tell me last week that you didn't want me in your wedding photos because I wasn't really there for you during this special time? I asked, looking directly at her. Her face went completely white as the reality of what I was saying began to sink in. I didn't mean. I was just stressed, she stammered. And Brandon, didn't you say I could help with the bar costs if I wanted to contribute something useful? I continued, turning to face him. Brandon looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Look, man, we were just... Just what? I interrupted. Just planning to use me as your personal bank while treating me like I'm not good enough to be in your family photos? Derek, please! Victoria was sobbing now. I'm sorry, okay? I was being horrible. But this is my wedding. I'll do anything to make this right. Anything? I asked. Yes, she said desperately. I'll pay you back every penny you've ever spent on me. I'll get a real job. I'll stop with the Instagram stuff. Whatever you want. I looked at Lucas, who was clearly enjoying this situation more than he probably should have been. Tell you what, I said slowly. There might be a way to work something out. Victoria's eyes lit up with hope. Really? Yeah. See, Lucas and I are business partners. We bought this place together about 20 months ago and completely renovated it. I watched as the reality of what I was saying slowly dawned on both of them. The color drained from their faces as they began to understand the full scope of the situation. You own this place? Brandon stammered. Co-own it, I corrected. Which means I knew about your booking from day one. I knew when you missed your deadline, and I knew when we gave your date to someone else this morning. Victoria looked like she might actually faint. Derek, why didn't you tell me? Because you made it crystal clear that you only valued me for my money. So I decided to see exactly how far you'd take that attitude. But you could have just reminded us about the deposit, she said weakly. I could have, I agreed. But you told me I wasn't really there for you, remember? So I decided to step back and let you handle everything yourselves. You wanted to treat me like a vendor instead of your brother, so that's exactly what I did. I treated you like customers who don't pay their bills. Brandon was getting angry now. This is messed up, man. You sabotaged your own sister's wedding. I didn't sabotage anything, I replied calmly. You failed to meet your contractual obligations. That's entirely on you. But you could have prevented this, Brandon insisted. Why should I asked. You both made it crystal clear that I wasn't welcome at your wedding unless I paid for the privilege. You wanted to exclude me from family photos because I wouldn't give you $16,000. So I gave you exactly what you asked for. I removed myself from the situation entirely. Victoria was hyperventilating now. Derek, please, I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll be the best sister ever. I'll never ask you for money again. Please just give us our date back. I looked at my sister, completely broken, and finally understanding that actions have consequences. Part of me did feel bad seeing her like this, but then I remembered 9 years of being treated like nothing more than a walking checkbook. Victoria, I said quietly, do you remember the last thing you said to me on the phone? I don't remember, she whispered. You said not to expect any special treatment at your wedding. Well, congratulations. You're getting exactly what you asked for. No special treatment. You're being treated like any other client who doesn't pay their bills. She collapsed back onto the couch, completely defeated. Brandon sat down next to her, staring at the floor in stunned silence. Is there anything we can do? Brandon asked quietly. Any amount we can pay to fix this? Lucas and I exchanged glances. Actually, Lucas said, we do have one other date available. They both looked up with desperate hope in their eyes. When? Victoria whispered. February 18th, Lucas replied. This February? She asked hopefully. Next February, 16 months from now. But all our vendors, our invitations, our guests. Victoria started to protest. Not our problem, I said firmly. Take it or leave it. They sat in stunned silence for a full minute, processing this information. Finally, Brandon asked, how much would the deposit be for February? $31,000, Lucas replied without missing a beat. That's double what the June date cost, Victoria said in shock. February is peak wedding season, Lucas explained with a completely straight face. Higher demand, premium pricing. Victoria looked at me with complete desperation. Derek, I know I messed up. I know I've been a terrible sister. Please, I'm begging you. Help us one more time. I'll sign a contract. I'll give you collateral, whatever you want. And looking at her sitting there, finally understanding how badly she had damaged our relationship, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Victoria, you've been asking me for money for 9 years. You've never paid me back even once. You've never shown genuine appreciation for the sacrifices I've made for your dreams. And when I finally set a boundary, you tried to punish me by excluding me from your wedding photos. I was so wrong, she sobbed. I was selfish and horrible. Yes, you were, I agreed. And now you get to live with the consequences of those choices. I turned to Lucas. We should go. We have other appointments. As we walked toward the office, Victoria called after us. Derek, wait. I'll give you anything. I'll sign over my car. I'll work for you for free. Please don't do this to me. But I didn't turn around. In the office, Lucas was shaking his head in amazement. That was intense, brother. Think I was too harsh? I asked. Are you kidding? She had that coming for years. Maybe now she'll finally learn that other people aren't just there to fund her fantasies. 3 hours later, I got a text from Kevin. Heard about the venue situation from Victoria. She's pretty devastated. But honestly, I think you did the right thing. She needed a reality check. That evening, there was a knock on my door. It was Victoria, alone this time. She looked completely different. No makeup, wearing normal clothes, hair in a simple ponytail. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I let her in, and we sat in my living room. "Brandon broke up with me," she said without preamble. I wasn't surprised, but I waited for her to continue. "He said he couldn't handle the family drama, and that he realized I was too high maintenance for him," she explained, tears starting to form in her eyes. She started tearing up. "Derek, I've lost everything. My fiancé, my wedding, my dream venue, and it's all because of my own actions." "That's the first accurate thing you've said in years," I replied. "I know you probably think I'm a terrible person," she said. "I don't think you're terrible, Victoria. I think you lost sight of what actually matters." "I did," she admitted. "I got so caught up in trying to look successful online that I forgot how to be a decent human being to the people who actually cared about me." She wiped her eyes. "Can I ask you something?" "What?" "If I really change, like genuinely become a better person, is there any chance we can have a real relationship again? Not the money stuff, just being brother and sister?" I looked at her for a long moment. She seemed genuinely remorseful for the first time in years. "Victoria, I've been waiting almost a decade for you to grow up and realize that relationships are about more than what people can do for you financially." "I know," she said, "and I'm going to prove that I can change. I already applied for jobs at 4 different companies. Real jobs, not this influencer nonsense. You don't have to prove anything to me," I told her. "Just focus on becoming the person you want to be." We sat quietly for a few minutes. "Derek," she said softly. "Yeah? I really am sorry for everything. You deserve so much better from me." And for the first time in years, she actually sounded like she meant it. 4 months later, Victoria got a job in marketing at a local company. She moved into a modest apartment that she could actually afford on her own salary, stopped posting constantly on social media about her fake lifestyle, and started paying me back small amounts every month. Not because I asked her to or demanded it, but because she insisted it was the right thing to do. Brandon never tried to reconcile with her after their breakup, and honestly, she seemed relieved about that outcome. She realized that he was just as shallow and materialistic as she had been, only interested in the appearance of success rather than building something real and meaningful with another person. Our relationship is still a work in progress, and I wouldn't say everything is perfect between us. But for the first time in almost a decade, I feel like I have my actual sister back. Not the Instagram persona she'd been performing for years, but the real person underneath all that artificial nonsense. She still has moments where the old entitled Victoria surfaces and makes an appearance, but she catches herself now and apologizes when it happens. It's clear that she's genuinely trying to change her behavior patterns and become a better person. Last week, she called to tell me she got a promotion at work and wanted to take me out to dinner to celebrate. Her treat. It was the first time she'd ever offered to pay for anything for me in our entire adult lives, which was both touching and long overdue. We went to this little Italian place downtown. Nothing fancy, nothing Instagram-worthy, just good food and actual conversation. We talked about her job, my construction projects, Kevin's new girlfriend, and all the normal sibling stuff that we'd never really done before because our relationship had always been transactional. At the end of dinner, she handed me an envelope which surprised me. "What's this?" I asked. "It's 500, she said. "I know it's not much compared to what I owe you, but I wanted to give you something more substantial than the usual $50 monthly payments." "Victoria, you don't have to do this," I told her. "Yes, I do," she insisted. "Derek, I stole 9 years of normal brother-sister relationship from us because I was too selfish and immature to appreciate what I had. I can't get those years back, but I can try to make sure the next 9 years are different." She looked me directly in the eyes with more sincerity than I'd seen from her in years. "I want you to know that even if I never pay back another dollar, these past few months of having you actually talk to me again, of being included in family stuff, of feeling like I have a brother who doesn't hate me, that's worth more than any wedding or Instagram post ever was." I took the envelope and put it in my pocket. "Victoria, I never hated you. I was just tired of being treated like an ATM instead of family." "I know," she said, "and I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to figure that out." As we walked back to our cars, she asked me something that surprised me. "Derek, do you think I'll ever find someone who actually loves me for me? Not for what I can give them or how I make them look?" "Of course you will," I assured her. But first, you have to know who you actually are without all the performance and pretending. I think I'm starting to figure that out, she said. It's scary, but kind of exciting too, like I'm meeting myself for the first time. We hugged goodbye, and I watched her drive away in her modest Honda that she bought with her own money, instead of the least luxury car she used to demand I co-sign for. Lucas and I are still business partners, and Ocean View Estate is doing better than ever. We've built a reputation for running a professional operation with clear policies and consistent standards. Roberto's wedding in June was absolutely beautiful, and he paid his deposit early without any drama or complications. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had just given Victoria the money she wanted for her wedding. She'd probably still be the same entitled person she was before. Brandon would have probably dumped her anyway once the money ran out, and the real financial pressure started, and I'd be out another $25,000 with nothing to show for it. But most importantly, Victoria never would have learned that her actions have consequences and that relationships require mutual respect and consideration, not just one person constantly taking while the other gives endlessly. The whole experience taught me something important about setting boundaries and not enabling destructive behavior, even when it comes from people you love deeply. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the natural consequences of their choices, even if it's painful to watch them struggle. Victoria texts me now probably twice a week, not asking for anything, just checking in and sharing funny memes, telling me about her coworkers, and doing all the normal stuff that siblings do when they have a healthy relationship. Last month, she sent me a picture of her paycheck. Not to brag about the amount, which wasn't particularly impressive, but because she was proud that she earned it herself without anyone's help or financial support. And honestly, I was proud of her too. It's taken almost 30 years, but I finally have the sister I always hoped she could be. Someone who values relationships over transactions, who understands that love isn't measured in dollar amounts, and who's building a life based on her own efforts and integrity rather than other people's money. The wedding venue business is going great. We've expanded to 3 locations now and are booked solid for the next 18 months. Turns out that when you run your business with clear policies and don't make exceptions for people who don't respect contracts, you attract clients who actually value what you're providing. Every time I walk through Ocean View Estate, I remember that day when Victoria and Brandon sat in our lobby, completely broken and desperate, begging for another chance. And I think about how different things could have been if Victoria had just treated me like family instead of a bank account from the beginning. But then I remember that sometimes the best stories are the ones where people learn and grow, even if it takes losing everything first. And honestly, watching Victoria become the person she was always capable of being has been worth more than any amount of money I ever spent on her old lifestyle. The Instagram influencer version of my sister is gone, and I couldn't be happier about that. Because the real Victoria, the one who works hard, pays her own bills, and treats people with respect and gratitude, is someone I'm actually proud to call family. TLDR. My entitled sister expected me to fund her dream wedding after years of treating me like a personal ATM. When she told me I couldn't be in wedding photos unless I paid $16,000, I let her find out the hard way that I co-owned her dream venue and watched her lose everything when she couldn't pay the deposit. It was the wake-up call she needed to finally become a decent human being.